Thanks a lot. So now we'll have our first speaker, Nishant Lalwani. So he's the CEO of Luminate. For those who do not know what is Luminate, Luminate is one of the world's biggest funding body for civic tech. It means also democracy and fact-checking organizations. Nishant?
Can I have the clicker? Great. Does this work? It works. Hi, everyone. My name's Nishant Lalwani. Thank you. And I'm the Director for Independent Media at Luminate. And Luminate is a philanthropic organization that supports a variety of for-profits and non-profits that try and strengthen the relationship that individuals have with institutions. Now, you've already seen some of my slides, thanks to my colleague at Facebook, against my will. But this is an example of one of our organizations. It's Chequeado, which is a fact-checking organization. I believe they're in the audience today. Hi there. Thanks for all the great work that you do. I believe this is a board game, it's kind of a life-size board game, explaining some of the impact that misinformation has on society, and it's from La Plata in Argentina. Now, I'm not going to talk to you actually very much today about the problems that we face. I'm sure there'll be some discussion of that later, but given that I'm in a room full of practitioners, tech companies, and others who, some of whom are actually devoting their careers to tackling these problems, I'm going to try and instead highlight some of the solutions that we as Luminate are seeing, some of the amazing work that our portfolio is doing, and also some of the perspectives that we have. So I'm going to start by giving you a quick overview of Luminate, just so you know where I'm coming from and who I am. And then talk a little bit about the work our portfolio is doing, and then finally talk about our Digital Democracy Charter, which is a perspective that Luminate has published. So we believe in a world where people and institutions can work together to build just and fair societies. We're particularly interested in how individuals can have greater agency over the decisions and mechanisms and institutions that actually hold power over them and that affect their lives. We do this by supporting both for-profit and non-profit entities. We also advocate for policies and actions that help those people participate in those decisions and that makes power more transparent, more responsive, and accountable. We've supported in the last 10 years or so about 230 organizations, given over $300 million to those institutions, and we operate in these 18 countries. We're actually formerly known as the Omidyar Network. We changed our name last year to Luminate, but we have been on operation, our team, for about 10 years in many of these countries. And these are the four areas where we spend most of our time and most of our money. First of all, civic empowerment. So this is really about giving people a way of connecting to government and giving government a way of understanding what's happening amongst their constituency. So one of the examples of our investments here, change.org. I'm sure many of you have signed petitions to create movements that allow for voices to be represented. Data and digital rights. Here our goal is to ensure that the rights of people and communities are upheld in the design of data and technology. And I'll be talking a little bit about this later, but we fund institutions like Privacy International that do this. Third, financial transparency. Here it's about tackling corruption, demanding transparency, and ensuring that governments and others who use public funds spend that money transparently and with accountability. And then lastly, independent media. And that's the area that I lead, and really our goal there is to defend a vibrant and free press and create kind of a pluralistic media system in each of the countries in which we work that's representative of the audiences it's trying to serve. A little bit more on media. We basically have four types of support that we offer. First of all, we're focused on high-impact investigative journalism that holds power to account. You'll know many of our investees in this area, for example, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, the Panama Papers and the Paradise Papers, also the Organised Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, who this year uncovered the biggest money laundering scandal in history, the Danske Bank work. Secondly, we look at financial models that allow for editorial independence. Think of this as new business models for news. We've been investing heavily in membership models around the world. The membership puzzle project at New York University is one of the hubs of this, but we also invest in things like The Correspondent, the Ken in India, which is a profitable membership model that sort of issues one long-form piece every day. Thirdly, press freedom and promoting the right to question authority is a really key part of what we do. We've funded organizations like Reporters Without Borders, Forbidden Stories, which publishes the work of journalists who've been imprisoned or harmed, and also the Media Legal Defense Initiative, who fight cases on behalf of journalists who are being threatened or being sued with political motive. And then fourthly, the area that I suspect will be of interest to you is we focus on battling mis and disinformation online. And unfortunately, this is the area where we see the least concrete solutions. It's a complex, multifaceted problem, which is, in a way, an interlinking of all of the things above. Business models and the lack of financial profitability in the sector has undermined journalism in a way that's allowed and created space for the Internet Research Agency, for Macedonian news farms, for the impact on elections that disinformation has had, the divisive effect on polarization in society, and the corrosion of accountability. So we give roughly $15 million a year to these four areas, and you will probably recognize some of our portfolio. I've talked about some of them already, and many of them are actually here today from our fact-checking portfolio. Not all of these groups, but this is what we consider to be the subset of our portfolio that's working on mis and disinformation. So that's enough about Luminate. I'm going to talk a little bit now about our portfolio. And I want to highlight a report that came out last month from the Global Disinformation Index, which is a grantee of ours. They did an analysis of 20,000 misinformation domains, and these were tagged as being domains as such by PolitiFact and other kind of databases of junk news. What they found was that by doing a detailed analysis of the metadata, looking at page views, correlating CPM, advertising rates with those page views, what they found is that $235 million a year is being spent by advertisers on disinformation domains. And these are domains that are, well known to be spouting misleading or false content. So an example of that is Big American News. You can see that there's an ad for Sprint, that's the yellow banner at the top, which is a major American telecoms company, on Big American News, which has a patently false headline. We found similar ads that GDI did with Audi and Vodafone and other very sort of leading companies around the world. Now, if you look at the ad exchanges that are channeling this money, Google's at the top of the list, AppNexus second. Together they account for more than half of that 235 million that's going to those sites. Furthermore, if you look at 120 what they call low-risk sites, so this is the BBC, the Chicago Tribune, Al Jazeera, they get a huge amount of traffic. Then the green are the low-risk sites, the red the disinformation domains. There are actually, similar levels of advertising revenue going to those disinformation sites. Now, of course, there's different numbers of sites involved there, but those 120 low-risk sites get a huge amount of traffic, and certain ad exchanges like Criteo is actually channeling vastly more into that sample. So we believe that this kind of research is necessary to highlight the problem and illuminate some pretty concrete things that could be done about that problem. I also want to touch on the amazing work that FullFact's doing with regards to its partnership with Facebook. Of course, FullFact, one of the organizers here, so I won't speak on their behalf, but I do want to commend them on the thoughtfulness, on the transparency, and the challenge which they put forward with their recommendations to Facebook and also to government on how they can tackle the ecosystem level issues in misinformation rather than just the act of fact-checking. Both of these reports I've cited are public, in case you want to look into them further. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit, oh dear, my slide's gone a bit wrong. I want to talk a little bit about our own view as Luminate on what needs to be done to sort of chart out a more secure, truthful, trusting online future for our societies. We've taken a rights-based approach to digital rights and to trust and truth online. And what I mean by that is rather than putting the burden on individuals that they should be responsible for example, controlling their data, for, separating fraudulent media from fact-based media and so on, we believe that it's actually the rights of individuals to be protected from some of that. And I think what's clear at the moment is that we stand at an inflection point. Our democracies are being pulled apart by the abuse of technologies that were once heralded as liberating forces. There are no single solutions that can meaningfully change this, but we do think that a combination of policies, both civil society as well as government policies, will actually begin to show results over time. And while we can't predict the course that society will take, we believe that if we put in place a reform agenda that tackles and promotes some of these rights and these duties that we have as a society, that we will get to a significantly better place. We're in the very early stages of kind of the rise of digital media, even though we feel like the last 20 years or so have been very transformative. The new generation of young voters, for example, are coming in having not lived in a world without digital media, without some of the tech platforms. And so there's a huge scope for us to begin to have an impact. And so what we've done is we've laid out these 9 principles which we think are really important. And I'm going to talk you through them. So first of all, remove. We think that people have a right to be protected from illegal content. I'm talking about hate speech, defamation, incitement to violence. And furthermore, we think the duty to remove this illegal content should be assigned to the major platform companies who have the necessary resources, the technology, and also the responsibility to remove this. We believe that close supervision from, the judiciary or other public oversight sources is critical to do this. By reduce, number 2, we believe that the public has a right to be shielded from fraudulent media. Large media platforms should maintain responsive channels to receive input from users, from civil society organizations, news organizations, and also commercial partners. And in this way, we hope that fraudulent media, as well as inauthentic accounts and malicious disinformation, can actually be flagged and taken down before it goes viral. Number 3, by signal, we mean that we have the right to know who is trying to influence our political views and how they are doing it. So new regulations, we believe, should mandate that all automated accounts are clearly labeled, and that we should require the source of an ad, the funding behind it, and the scope of its reach are specifically made clear to the end user. Number 4, by audit, we believe that the public has a right to public oversight of the impact that technologies are having on the information diet that they are subject to. Technologies that mine large data sets are increasingly sophisticated forms of AI. They make predictive judgments about people that affect their lives. And these technologies have the potential to have a huge impact, both positive and negative, on society. So we think that the training data for these algorithms, the design bias inherent in them, some of the discriminatory outcomes, should actually be subject to public scrutiny. Number 5, privacy. I mean, digital privacy is a field of its own, but it's become clear that the mass collection of personal data feeds the algorithms that determine what kind of media content that we all see. And that, as has been well documented and well researched, creates filter bubbles, creates predictive judgments that lead to suboptimal information diets. And so individuals should have the right to control how data is used to shape their experiences and the information that they receive. And we believe that there should be explicit consent and a kind of partnership with individuals rather than placing the burden on them to sell their data or to own their data. By number 6, compete, we believe that we have a duty to protect the public against the exploitation of concentrated market power. What we're calling for here is essentially a modernization of antitrust. The rise of platform monopolies underscores the need to open markets to new competitors and products with possibilities such as data portability and restrictions on mergers so that we can have access to essential services and have choice as consumers and users. Number 7, secure. We believe that we have a duty to protect the integrity of our democracy from outside interference. Political institutions, such as parties and campaigns, we believe should have the same degree of security and cybersecurity afforded to them that we might afford to our electricity grids or our water systems. By number 8, educate. We think we have a duty to educate the public about the social and political impact of new technologies. This is a long-term solution. It could take decades to implement this, but alongside some of the shorter-term regulatory options which I've laid out, it is going to be unavoidable, I think, to ensure that, the digital literacy is within our educational curricula, that we have broad public awareness about the problem of disinformation. And then finally, number 9, inform. We believe that we have a duty to foster a robust public sphere and an informed electorate. The rise of disinformation has coincided, maybe even caused, the declining commercial viability of journalism. There's many factors that have caused that, but certainly it's ironic that at a time when the barriers to creating and sharing information are at the lowest they've ever been in history, that arguably the electorate is as poorly informed as it's been in recent history. So we believe that there should be support for the modernization of public media channels, that there should be tax benefits for newsrooms in the way that the Canadian government has recently suggested, and that there should be other support mechanisms that can foster the development of public interest media in a way that allows for informed citizens that can actually understand the decisions that are being made that affect their lives. So this is our Digital Democracy Charter. There's actually significantly more detail. It's all available online. I even have a couple of copies with me here if you'd like. But really, we believe that these policies, this reform agenda in the long term will be the only way of tackling some of the systematic problems we're seeing at a market level and a government level to tackle disinformation. Thanks so much, and I'm really happy to take questions.
Any question? Come on, it's a debate. I'm happy to ask, but...
Sam Cunningham from Polymonitor, a political technology company. I guess kind of just hearing a little bit more around kind of what sort of tax incentives you were talking about in terms of how the government is supposed to help people who want to create kind of organisations and tools which help inform the public. Polymonitor itself, that's its aim, and we feel that there's not a very good funding environment which encourages people to invest in political technology which helps technology which helps inform the public on political discussions?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. So I think there have been some examples recently of taxpayer money being used to service public interest media, right? So the example I just mentioned was the Canadian government who put aside around 160 million Canadian dollars to fund public interest media in Canada. And that, although I think the intent there is positive, that program has come under a lot of criticism because the criteria which they've used to decide what constitutes the public interest and which organizations are eligible for it is actually quite controversial. And there's always going to be people who are excluded from that, institutions who are excluded. And that's part of the problem with any government directly funding either technologies such as yourself, because it could be seen as being for the political interest, or by funding the media, because then there isn't an arm's length relationship between the state and the media, as is desirable in most cases. And so one of the things we've proposed as Luminate, we've been working with BBC Media Action to propose an idea for an international fund for public interest media. And that would be a kind of global fund in the mold of some of the global funds for TB, malaria and AIDS, and Gavi for vaccinations and so on. And the idea there would be that we could actually secure funds from government donors, so from the Department for International Development here, for example, or CEDA in Sweden, and other government donors, as well as we hope some of the large tech companies that have started putting money into journalism, and create a fund, a large fund. We're aiming for about $1 billion as a budget, and with that fund, we would have an independent decision-making committee and an independent strategy. It would be focused on funding public interest journalism and public interest media technologies that could be independent of any of the political agendas of the companies or the state that funded them. So I believe that we need new mechanisms to channel the kind of capital you're talking about into the sector, because it's hard for states, and troublesome in some senses for states to do it directly.
So we don't have much time. I would like to keep the agenda as it. We have 15 minutes break now. Please take the question offline. I'm sorry about that. But 15 minutes for a break, it's not a lot. So we will start again at 10:20. But let's thank the speaker again.
Thank you very much.
That was to